Turn to 3.
Positive rotation.
Welcome to Roll Call, a 126 Air Refueling Wing podcast of the Illinois Air National Guard at Scott Air Force Base. Roll Call is a podcast focused on people, mission, and community. I am your host today, Staff Sergeant Vincent Lane. This week's guest will be none other than the 126 Air Refueling Wing Religious Affairs Chaplain, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Landers. We will get into why Landers joined the Air National Guard, his life as a prison chaplain, what the Religious Affairs team does, and the benefits and resources they offer. Before we get started, we recognize our deployers serving overseas and welcome home those returning. Just a reminder, the DOC survey is open until November 30th. Please check your military email for web link and login information. We will have our holiday party coming up on December 7th at 12 p.m. in the hangar. To volunteer, please contact Airmen and Family Readiness. Now I'll hand it over to my co-host, Technical Sergeant Cesseron White, and our guest, Lieutenant Colonel Peter Landers.
Welcome back to Roll Call with the 126th Air Refueling Wing. I'm very happy to be sitting down with our guest today. Now, today we're talking about the chaplaincy and the chapel corps. Don't be scared off if you don't have a faith group that you participate in yourself, because we are going to talk about more than that. They do protect your constitutional right to worship in the way that you wish, but it's not just that. So if you don't have a particular faith group, none at all maybe, this is still for you. We have with us today our Lieutenant Colonel, Chaplain Peter Landers.
Yeah, it's good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah.
I enjoy it. Look forward to answering the questions and telling people a little bit about chaplaincy and what we do and how we can support you.
For sure. Tell us a little bit about that core mandate, like, the elevator pitch of what you do.
Oh, definitely. So we embody the spiritual wellness side of the support services. Mm-hmm. And so when I kind of look at it, if I'll give a little example,
yeah.
I kind of think of it. My wife does something called kombucha. Anybody do kombucha?
I drink kombucha.
Yeah, it has the probiotics and the good bacteria and all that in it. But it produces carbonation within the bottle. And if you don't have a release valve, that bottle will explode.
Oh.
Okay, so the way I look at chaplaincy is we're not the bottle, we're not the kombucha in the bottle, but we're the release valve that helps the unit. And one of the main ways we do that starts off with spiritual wellness. It begins with your faith, because a lot of people find their support in God. A lot of people find their support when they wake up in the morning, the reason that they live. And so that's what we're here for, because it's like the airplanes, right? If you don't do maintenance on the airplanes, they break down.
Yeah.
And the beautiful thing is we're human beings. We have emotions, we have happiness, we have joy, sometimes we're sad. And without chaplains, without the support systems there to help, we break down.
Yeah.
And so that's where we come in. Is the first part of it is your faith. We help you with your faith because we know for most people that's one of the number one things that they find peace, they find joy, they find purpose. And then also one of our support things under spiritual wellness is morale. We want to do morale. That's why the lattes, a lot of people are joking about the lattes and everything, but that is so important because we're not robots.
Tell us a little bit more about the lattes, because this right now might be someone's first time hearing or seeing about the lattes at all.
Okay, so we are doing a latte, and we also have a devotion that we do at the same time, but the lattes are like that release valve. It's for you, when you're coming to work, you're like, oh, I really don't want to go to work today, but hopefully in the process of that, oh, wait a minute, we're having lattes today, and all of a sudden there's a smile. All of a sudden your work is better. We make and help to make your work better because you can come in, you can have a latte, you can talk to a chaplain. If you're stressed or you're anxious, we can also pull you aside and talk with you. We're that release valve that helps. And that's why the lattes are so important, especially during the fall with pumpkin spice. I mean, you can't beat that, right?
Listen, I'm a pumpkin spice baddie. You can. I love some pumpkin spice, actually.
So at 8 o'clock on Sundays, and we're going to continue this on, we're also, thank you, Colonel Henschel, we're going to be setting setting up, and our command team, who have all been awesome,
Okay.
we're going to be setting up a chapel area as well. And a big part of that is we're going to continue these lattes. It's not going to end.
Okay.
We want to, and if you have other things that you can say, hey, you know what, Chaplain, have you considered this? We would love to consider that, because we're here to help you and to support you. When you're stressed out, we have that 100% confidentiality. Come see us. Because you know what? I don't care what it is. If you're stressed out, just come in and talk with us.
Yeah.
I mean, how many times do you need a friend to talk to?
Oh, all the time.
Yeah, maybe there's someone, you don't have a friend, or your friend's not here. You can say, you know what? I need to just take 5 minutes out and come to the chapel area and detox.
Yeah, absolutely. No,
And it'll never get to anybody.
That's super valuable. It's really important to be able to have that voice, and I think it's good that people use you as a resource. Like, I'm really happy to have you here, because I don't feel like people. I think that sometimes people know it in their head,
Yeah.
but don't always take the opportunity to follow through. And they might not be thinking about it in the times that they need it most. But this is a good refresher to say, hey, those resources are out there for people. We all need to talk to somebody. When you were going through the emotional spectrum, I couldn't help but think about Inside Out.
Oh,
I love those movies. I haven't seen talking about sadness and anger.
Yeah.
And I'm like, she needs a chaplain.
Well, that's what we
Her
walked
islands
through.
were falling apart.
We dive into that world, and a
Yeah.
lot of, let's be honest, but a lot of the leadership and team, they're focused on getting that mission done.
Yeah.
And that's why we're so important, is because we step aside and say, wait a minute, let's, everybody's stressing out. Let's look at the, what's happening on the inside, like that Inside Out does.
Like Inside Out does. And you know what? The mission is important. Leadership, I know that they realize that the people who fulfill the mission, and that's why they support
right.
you, are important to
Because
get
if the
it done.
plane breaks down, you don't have a plane. It's
Yeah.
the same thing with people. If people break down, then they don't have a team.
Yeah.
And so that's why we work together to support the commander and his initiatives, so we can, bring people ready for the fight.
So I have questions for you specifically, but just real quick, are there, top of your head, are there any misconceptions that you hear that you think that maybe people should know? Anything that you've been asked, maybe you want to clarify at all?
So a lot of misconceptions. People think, oh, chaplain, well, I'm not religious. You don't have to be religious.
You don't have to be.
We're here to support everyone. Like you said, a little bit before. And if you just need someone to talk to, hey, we're here. If you need a latte, if you need a break, if work is stressing you out, don't bottle that up inside, because what happens is you end up exploding at work, or you explode, on your family, and you need a place to release that. And so, a lot of people, oh, I'm not religious, oh, I don't want to talk about God. We will meet you where you're at.
Yeah.
And I think that's the key. We meet you where you're at. And then if you need spiritual guidance, we will work with you. If maybe I'm not the right faith that you are, and you want like certain things, like we just had something that someone wanted confession, or if someone wanted communion, or someone wanted an imam, or things like that, that's part of our accommodation as well. And at Scott, we'll reach out to local communities. If we're deployed, we reach out to see what resources that we have. And sometimes we can pull an imam from another base to bring them over and to do like a Friday Juma. So we're here to accommodate whatever we can. I think that sometimes that's a misconception.
Yeah.
Well, if I'm not religious, I don't go to the chaplain.
Absolutely. You know what's funny? So once upon a time, I was a chaplain assistant.
Okay.
And
awesome.
it was before you came to the unit. And I do want to ask you about when you came to the unit, but we did I remember doing a Wiccan wedding.
Okay.
And doing some other accommodations that you might not have thought of. Most people might not have, really considered. But I thought that was really interesting. I got to see some things that I was not at all familiar with. But that's part of the accommodation. Any faith group or no faith group, just that listening ear. So I guess. There's a lot to consider there. How long have you been with the 126th?
So, that's a good question. I'm probably gonna not say the right time, but has it been
Ballpark it.
Maybe 2 years? Has it been? Okay, I mean, time flies so fast.
It really
seems like
really
yesterday.
does. Yeah,
because I was in the reserves.
I feel like it's been longer than 2.
It might be. That's why I was saying
Yeah.
that's an on-the-cuff question if you would
Yeah,
get to me
yeah.
ahead of time.
Sorry about that.
But it's around 2 years.
Yeah.
And I've enjoyed it. I came from Little Rock. I was at 913th over there.
I was born in
for
Little
8
Rock.
years, and then before that, I was at Patrick, and then at McConnell, and then at Tinker.
So what moved you here?
So what moved me here was I'm a prison chaplain, and they let me out of prison, right, to come to military.
Uh-huh.
And so I went to the prison at Greenville, Illinois. And so during that time period, I kept driving. What is it, 12-hour drive there and back. And so one day I called up Chaplain Burden, and I was like, hey, you guys don't need anybody over with a guard, do you? And he said,
Yeah.
actually, we do. Why don't you come have lunch with us? So I came and had lunch, and I said, this is the place for me.
So was it a lunch or a brunch? Because just like you have lattes with Landers, I feel like brunch with Burden would have been a thing.
Yes, I think it probably was. I think we did hang out for a little bit, and it was brunch with Burden.
We miss him. He was a great part to the unit. I'm glad he brought you in.
Yeah, and definitely. So that's kind of how the journey started, and I came here, and the rest is kind of history.
Yeah. And we're making history now. So while in prison ministry, right? Tell me a little bit about the Venn diagram. So people who know me closely, they know that I love Venn diagrams. So in the Venn diagram of like this is military, this is prison ministry. What's the crossover and what's the benefit of the two? Is there something that you take from your prison ministry experience that can somewhat apply here, or vice versa?
So the way I look at it is we're all human beings, right? Yeah. We all have that human element that I talked about earlier, and I think the human element is so important. And so what I take from the prison, what I take from here, is that human element. And it's the same thing when I go into the prison setting and I minister to inmates. I look at them as human beings, not about their past. The same thing when I'm here. I'm not looking at people's past. I'm not looking at what you've done, because God offers love. He offers forgiveness. And so what I'm looking at is how can I meet and help this person in need. Yeah. And whether it's a crisis, whether it's religious accommodation, because we talked about that. Within the prison, I bring in rabbis and I bring in imams a lot more so than I do here. But there's a big variety, and it's to me it's exciting to help people and to meet their needs and to reduce that stress, because you can imagine how stressful prison is. I'm not going to go into all the stories, but I can tell lots of stories.
Oh boy,
it's stressful, and so is war. So is our environment within the military. Yeah. And the prison is also, how would you say it, a quasi-military setup as well. And so because a lot of our people are they retired, or they're reserves or they're guard that work in the prison, and so it's a similar environment. Okay.
All right. So what is something that you let's talk a little bit about the RST, if we can.
Okay.
And tell us what RST stands for?
Religious Support Team.
Religious Support Team. What's that team consist of, and why does it exist?
So within the team, we have Religious Affairs Airmen. And within that, we also have a chaplain. And so we are a team together to support airmen and support people in the unit. And so when someone comes in for a crisis, we're open to this. If they want to talk to, maybe they're like, I don't want to talk to an officer. Hey, you know what? The Religious Affairs Airmen are there for you as well. Yeah. And they're in the office. They can help support us with crisis. They're also extended our confidentiality as well. And so we are a team together. And when we go out and do unit visitation, they're there to help. They're just as alongside of us to support us, to encourage us, and all of us together are a team, and that's why Religious Affairs Airmen are so important. Yeah, and they're like the enlisted side, kind of like you have the chief and you have the commander. Yeah, it's a little bit of a balance there. It's funny because back when I was a chaplain assistant in the '80s, they just kidding. Back in the 80s.
No, so I would tell people that, and they're like, "Oh, you're a chaplain." I'm not a chaplain. I'm not a chaplain. I'm a chaplain assistant, part of that religious service team. Yeah. We work together in support of the chaplain, but different purposes, but really all serving the whole, right?
Yeah. And they're the support services helping us make what we do possible. Yeah. And so we are a team together. We go do visitation together, and they help on many different avenues, because you never know when someone comes in, they may feel more comfortable with the Religious Affairs Airmen, and we're more than happy with that. And then we couldn't do what we do without them.
Yeah. Okay. So what is something that you're proud of that you guys have done either recently within your office or just any accomplishment, just something that made you feel like, this is why we do what we do?
Okay. So what makes us excited, what gives us passion, of course, is to see people empowered to become who we believe, God or people have different faiths, has called them to be. And so one of the things that we're proud of, we did the Strong Bonds, and that's another shout out that I want to give for Strong Bonds. We have a retreat that we're looking at. We're thinking maybe July, and those retreats, we minister to family, we minister to kids. This last one, we had childcare. We talked about the 5 love languages. We talked about the 7 habits of a healthy team. And that makes us proud. That makes us excited because we see people going, oh, man, that was so awesome.
Yeah.
Why aren't more people coming to this? This really ministered to me.
They're really valuable. And those are not specific faith group things. Those are things that are applicable to all kinds of folks.
Everyone.
To everybody.
And this next year, we're actually going to focus on the individual aspect. We're going to offer other elements as well, and people will get lodging, and we'll provide the food, and they'll be able to come with their family.
What's the food? I might want to come.
Well, the last food was excellent, actually. I mean, I think for breakfast they had French toast and they had little avocados cut up. I mean, it was fancy, actually.
All right. I don't, so when is that supposed to, do you have dates and details to that yet? If you don't.
Okay. So, of course, we have to look at budget and timelines and everything. And with the current calendar, we're looking at July is when we're looking at it.
Okay, good stuff. So more information to come on that. We'll look at it again in July. We'll tap back then. So outside of the Air Force, you've been a pastor in the past. Can you tell us a little bit about that experience?
Okay. So my journey began actually in Oklahoma.
Ooh.
In Lawton, Oklahoma, there's a little town called Snyder, and I pastored a church there for a number of years. And then when I came, because I had to go back to seminary, because my heart was always
You needed a re-up? You had to recertify in seminary?
It was called a Master of Divinity. You had to have a Master of Divinity to be a chaplain.
Yes, sir.
That was just one of there's a number of little check boxes: Master of Divinity, endorsement, pastoral experience. And so I had to get these check boxes checked, because my dad was in 22 years, so I always wanted to be, an Air Force chaplain.
In the Air Force, 22?
Yes.
Very
So
nice.
he was in the Air Force 22 years. Back in the day, they had morale, welfare, and recreation.
Yeah.
And it was a great time in my childhood. And so when I look at it, I was like, I want to be a chaplain. So when I went to my endorser, they're like, well, you need to go get some experience. So I did a church plant in Austin, Texas with a church in Springfield, Missouri. And then after that, I pastored in Lawton, Oklahoma. And then I went back to seminary for Master of Divinity. And during that time period, I also did a hospital chaplaincy in a program called Clinical Pastoral Education. Within that, I was working in the emergency rooms, I was working in the natal units, I was working in trauma, all of that. So heavy stuff.
Yeah.
So right after the CPE program, I finished my Master of Divinity, and we were just praying, allowing God to lead me, and I ended up going into not only the military, but shortly after went into the prison, because I went through the chaplain candidate program, and then I went into the prison at the same time. And so when I got done with the chaplain candidate program, that's when I became a chaplain, and I started at Tinker Air Force Base around 2008.
Okay.
And then at the same time, I started in the prison in Miami, Florida.
Miami?
Yes, Miami,
Welcome
Florida.
to Miami.
And that was the journey of prison. From Miami, I went to Forest City, Arkansas, to a prison, and then now here to Greenville. And, of course, throughout the Air Force, I was at Tinker, and then McConnell, and then Patrick, and then here.
Done a lot. Different experiences and work with
Yes.
different types of folks, different situations.
Yeah, working with all faith, with the diversity of everything.
Yeah.
And one thing I love is, especially within the hospital, you realize that we're not robots.
Yeah.
Right? And I notice there's a lot of people
Worn
that when they
down.
give up sometimes. And there could be nothing wrong with them, and they'll be in the hospital and die, and you're like, the doctor's like, they gave up.
You know, I was going to ask if you were talking about people in beds or if you were talking about the staff. Because staff can get pretty worn down too. That's interesting. All these experiences, I think, probably make you the well-rounded chaplain that you are.
Oh, yeah.
So
No, definitely.
I want to thank you again for stopping by and
No
having
problem.
this little conversation with us. And hopefully hopefully we've educated folks about what the office does in the Chaplain Corps, and you as a person.
I know, definitely. And
Thanks again.
appreciate you guys, all you do, and we're here to support your needs. So just let us know, and we're here.
All right.
Yeah.
Resiliency.
You can find all of our links at linktr.ee/126ARW. Or follow us on YouTube or anywhere you find your favorite podcast. Thanks again for listening to Roll Call. Roll Call is a 126 Air Refueling Wing podcast focused on people, mission, and community. I am Staff Sergeant Vincent Lane, signing off.